Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are in the Meno today. Hooray! So, last time we had a look at some interesting things. We had some questions about, some questions about knowledge. And we talked about the significance of the dialectic and the importance of the importance of something that we've been doing the whole way that we've been reading, looking for questions, giving birth to questions, developing questions, and carrying questions. To be on a question is to be on a quest. That didn't make sense. To carry a question is to be on a quest. So that also, interestingly enough, corresponds with what we've been reading, because our friend Meno has been having trouble becoming curious. He claims that he has been stung, but instead of embracing that, he is attacking Socrates, calling him a flat-headed stingray and threatening him as well. If you leave Athens, you will be what did he say? Killed? Quickly driven away. Because he's practicing sorcery. Why? Well, how come Meno can't talk about what virtue is when he's certain he knows? He's given many good speeches, and it still appears to him that they are good speeches, and in front of many people. So, coincidentally enough, yesterday, the YouTube algorithm recommended a video where a couple of fundamentalist Christians, father and son, no less, were talking with our friend Alex Connor, I think his name is. I wouldn't call him a philosopher, maybe a reasoner. Someone who likes to add logic into conversations and engage in debates. So not philosophy, because philosophy is not about debating, it's about dialectic. And it's not about defeating opinions, it's about understanding. Nevertheless, it can be fun sometimes to see people speak truth or introduce reason to people who otherwise are void of reason. Who don't know how to reason or don't value reason or just use words as a tool to justify their opinions, like our friend Meno here. His use of words and language have been to justify his opinions. His idea of virtue is just to justify his opinions and his status and his upbringing and his beliefs. And when given a paradigm for how to actually come to a definition, how to actually reason, he instead opted to quote a poet that happens to agree with his opinions. Very much like what we see from religious people. So these people, again, selectively quoting parts from the Bible to justify their own personal opinions, not really engaging in any dialogue at all, and never once did they become curious, never once did they become open-minded, and never once did they vary from a kind of certainty, just like our friend Meno. Even now in the text, Meno is still certain he knows a lot about virtue, just like these people. And I think the two people are known for going into public spaces and debating strangers or making declarations about how smart they are, just as a way, of course, of using language to justify their false opinions. And false not only because they are irrational and they are untrue, but because they've never reflected on them. It has never crossed their mind that the beliefs that they got from childhood might be wrong. So they are not at any point in that video recommended by YouTube was there any kind of self-reflection or open-mindedness. But that's what Socrates is encouraging us to do. In fact, when Meno attacks Socrates because he doesn't know what to say, and many times in that conversation with Alex, these people didn't know what to say, when Alex is pointing out the morality that justifies Genocide in the Bible justifies killing innocent people, killing animals as revenge, killing women and children. Completely unjustifiable acts of what they would call evil, but injustice. They couldn't say anything. Very curiously, they did seem very angry, though. Very angry. And the kind of anger that was on their faces matched, as though a son was imitating father. And in philosophy, we push the implications. We might ask the question, I wonder if father is imitating his father. I wonder if there's a family tradition of when you are brought to what should be a point in your reflection, when you are curious, when you've got a question, now you are wondering and you are reflecting in a new way. That should be where you're at, but instead your reaction is to get angry or self-righteous, seethe like this, their eyes twitching and their mouth like this, and the father with the angry lines that are so familiar to his way of being that they're worn into his face. The sons are a little less deep because he's younger. Very common for someone like that. Very common for people who make a living claiming to be experts, what we might call professional opinion havers, which dominate the discourse in our culture right now. All of these foolish people who have media networks, have podcasts, get millions of views a day, claim to be news reporters, run networks and things like that. Nothing other than professional opinion havers, or as Socrates referred to them, philodoxias, lovers of opinions. They love to hear their own opinions. So, very interesting. Of course, didn't go anywhere, that conversation, because that's what happens when you debate. When you debate, as soon as somebody is brought to as far as they can go with their logos, as far as they can rationally reflect on a subject, and they hit their ceiling, they don't change. There's no reflection, self-reflection. And importantly, there's no curiosity and wonder, what we are calling in the text being stung, like a stingray. Puzzlement, or the Greek word aporia. No, their masks come on, they are certain, they get angry, just as Meno is angry and blaming Socrates, Oh, how dare you, Socrates? I'm an expert, don't you know? You and your reasoning and your reflection and your dianoia of the realm of truth and being, and your way of understanding how to understand, your way of understanding how to relate to people in a good, beneficial way. Whoa, it's sorcery, I say. And you, if you're out of Athens, they'll get you, they will. So personal attacks, attacks of his appearance, ad hominem, you are a sorcerer. It's not sorcery, it's just the logos. Anyone can share in the logos, provided they do those things that Meno is lacking, seems to be lacking. To do those things that these religious people are lacking, that almost all people in debates lack. What do they lack? Curiosity, puzzlement, wonder. Why? Because debates are all about winning. And a lot of people have their whole identity, their role, even their job, their fame tied to being experts. People agreeing with their stupid opinions. So what's the worst thing, according to their false beliefs, that they can do? Be curious, be stung, be in a state of aporia. A certain state of mind that we have seen is actually self-virtue. It's no less self-virtue than being full of wisdom, provided the way that you are going about it is just. What is justice? That's our question. What is virtue? That's the question that we have on the table. Seems to be tied to this way of thinking, way of talking, called the dialectic, way of reasoning, way of having a conversation, which is the opposite of debate, which is about owning your opponent, making them more entrenched in their illness, which is a terrible thing to do to somebody. You want people to be more loyal to their ignorance? You want to introduce reason to people who aren't familiar with reason, like religious people who have been taught their whole life that reason is the devil. Faith, to believe that which is irrational, is actually the thing that's going to save you from the fiery pits of hell. They've been taught to fear their own mind and the logos, the very thing they are here to master. So to introduce logos in a debate format in a way where you are making them need to defend their own false beliefs, but what are they going to do? They may walk away hating the logos, hating reason, hating self-reflection, hating even conversation. They want to race back to their church where there's no conversation. They are just exclaiming their opinions to a crowd in the front of the church and the pulpit. No conversation there, no questions there, no reason there. Just selectively picking out quotes that match the opinions that you already hold from childhood, that have been entrenched by the way that you've grown up. It's not very difficult. It's the part of the human condition, which we are learning about in our series on philosophical midwifery. But this is a problem with not having awoken a true understanding of philosophy yet in our culture, or reawakened it. The fall since Socrates, we need to reawaken philosophy, because that's not philosophy. Socrates isn't doing that. At each stage where Meno hits his limit and lashes out, calls him a sorcerer, threatens him if he leaves the city, attacks his appearance, mocks him. Hey, you don't know what virtue is? Ha ha ha, I'm going to tell everybody that, how dumb you are. At every stage, Socrates responds with kindness and fairness, and hey, yeah, maybe you're right. Hey, yeah, well, if you are blaming me for stinging you, so long as you think I'm stinging you because I am first stung myself, and you being stung is a secondary effect, yeah, okay, that's fine. And yeah, if you want to tell people I don't know what virtue is, that's fine. I've never met anybody who does. By the way, now that we've addressed that, let's get back to the conversation. Let's get back to the logos. Let's get back to trying to follow the logos with the paradigm of the dialectic, which I have laid out several times. I've given you many opportunities to play. And you know what? You're attacking me? I'll give you another chance. Opposite of debate. I guarantee you, I bet you $1 million that those two people walk away from that debate with Alex, who used reason, because that's what he is familiar with, to show that their beliefs are false and harmful. I guarantee they'll walk away more entrenched in those false, harmful beliefs. At not one point in that video did I see them go from certainty to curiosity. At not one point did I see them curious. Not at one point did I actually see them reflect on themselves in any sort of way. There's no ousia. There's no being stung or open-mindedness and curiosity. Balloons. And at no point do they learn how to use the logos. The three most essential elements that Socrates is introducing, that Socrates is using as an art. Hey, let's reflect on yourself. He started by saying, oh, by the way, do you see the sort of person that you are? Right now, at this point of history, in this point of your evolution, at this point of time, this is your family, this is your city, this is another city that's very similar to the way that you think. This is what you think it means to be wise. This is what your partner is. This is who your teacher was. Isn't it interesting? This is your starting point. Do you want to reflect on those things? Self-reflection, what we call ousia. Self-reflection is a starting point. If you're not reflecting on yourself, you're not in the game. At every level of spiritual and philosophical development is a deeper level of ousia. Just simply that. Just that simple reflecting on where you are as a physical being. Reflecting on your surroundings. That would be new to Meno. I bet he's never thought about that. It seems so obvious to us. Of course your family plays a part. Of course growing up rich plays a part. Of course whoever your teacher was plays a part. I bet Meno's never thought about that before. I bet those two, I think they're well known on YouTube, I don't really know. I bet those two outspoken Christian apologists have never thought about who their teacher was, have never thought about the influence of their family, have never thought about the connection between what they believe is true about self, reality, God, and how to live, and their wealth and privilege by being a wealthy white Christian man in America. So introducing those sorts of questions, basic ones, Alex could have done. That may have been an introduction to a new kind of activity, a new kind of use of consciousness, a new kind of use of self-energy, a new kind of use of attention, awareness, self-reflection. And yes, baby steps. But it's a start. It's the doorway in. This is the importance of learning philosophy rather than just calling yourself a philosopher. I'm not attacking Alex. He would also need to reflect on who did he learn philosophy from? Was it from Western academics within a tradition, the Latin tradition, that didn't have a word for the, therefore could not ask questions about the virtue, the beautiful? A tradition ruled by the Romans and the Catholic Church that killed the philosophers, in a tradition that hasn't gone back to Socrates yet, in a tradition that hasn't even read a good translation of Socrates or Plato. So of course he doesn't know what philosophy is. Of course his education, family, upbringing, society has told him, hey, you know what philosophy is? Being certain about your opinions, but being really clever in who you quote and how you can use logic to own ignorant people with debate, embarrass them, humiliate them. Yes, it will leave them worse than when they started because they're more entrenched in their false beliefs, having been forced to defend it. Yes, they will be angry at you and probably angry at reasoning itself. Yes, they will be less inclined to self-reflect because, hey, they would have had to have some sort of openness, of some sort of reflection to even start a conversation, and that you just kicked the crap out of by humiliating them, by showing them that what they dearly hold as true is absurd and harmful and the exact opposite of what they think it is. He was right, and for a lot of people, it can be useful to have that as a wake-up call. But these people, walking away hating philosophy, hating reason, we ask the question, did it benefit their soul? Did it benefit? If not, it's not an art. If it's not benefiting a soul, it's not the logos. If it's not benefiting the soul, it's not philosophy. It's something else, something very different. Socrates, 2,500 years ago, said, hey, you know what? If people don't listen to what I'm saying about what philosophy really is, the people who will claim the title as philosophers will be philodoxias, lovers of opinions. And they will use words antagonistically, and they'll be philonikos, lovers of fighting and debates. Spot on. Socrates is dead on. That is what we think philosophy is. That is what we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to universities to get that title of philosophy for. Socrates was right, as he tends to be. So what? So we want to learn. We want to be a bit different. No, we want to be exactly different. We want to not love our own dumb opinions, but see if we can foster a kind of self-reflection. And it can be just starting with, hey, I wonder what my beliefs might be, or I wonder what the influence my family had on my beliefs are. I wonder what I think I'm really certain about that I might not have reflected on, that maybe I could. That's a start. The more you learn philosophy, the more that you read in the way that we're learning how to do, that self-reflection picks up a kind of structure or paradigm called the dialectic. It's this structure of reasoning and thinking and understanding that Socrates has been saying. We're only 15 pages in, 15 out of 48. And Socrates has said several times already, use the dialectic. That's the paradigm. He's given Meno a couple of opportunities. In one of the times when he was outlining the paradigm of the dialectic, Meno said, well, what if I'm one of those debate bros? And I say, well, I dismiss the conclusion because one of the terms, I'm going to pretend I don't know what it means. People do that often. They play dumb about a term and they win on a technicality. Socrates says, oh yeah, well those people who call themselves wise, but they're not, those people who use the logos to in a heuristic way, a debate bro who just love to fight, they're just antagonistic people, those people I'd be sterner towards. But hey, if you're a true friend, I don't have to be like that. I would approach a true friend in a gentler way called the way of the dialectic. He's literally saying, this is what I would do to people who are genuine. If you're just using words to bullshit me and justify your ignorance and the harmful actions that result, Meno has given definitions of virtue that involve harming people, hurting people. Right? How many people today think that part of virtue is hurting people you don't like, genociding people you don't like? Right now, time of the recording, Trump just got in office and he got he got more of the votes, a lot more of the votes, because he said, hey, wouldn't you guys like to harm people you don't like? Round up all the immigrants? Take away all human rights from women? We'll start by taking away their right to their own body, using technical language. Well, technically, you have to always give birth because technically you could use words to pretend that some cells inside your body is actually a full person who has full human rights. So I'm not anti-woman, I'm pro-life. Bullshit. That's the kind of use of language that is terrible that Socrates has pointed out. Don't you want to round up all the immigrants? That's what Donald Trump is promising. Don't you want to harm people who are unlike you? Don't you want to make pregnancy a crime and therefore take away the right to vote from women? Yeah, that has an appeal to people who do not understand the logos and have not gone through philosophical midwifery and realize that in the absence of true progression up a hierarchy of learning of the logos, the only way that they think, what they think is virtue, is just harming people. Cosplaying, in the same way those two Christian people were pretending to be clever and wise, so too do all of these racist, sexist idiots is a harsh word, racist, sexist, fascists, think that wisdom is harming your enemies. That's literally Meno's position. Virtue is being good to your friends and harming your enemies. And if your enemies are women, or people who look differently than you, that's literally Donald Trump's entire platform, and he won. He won the power over the biggest military and the biggest political force in the world right now. Simply by saying, hey, let's harm all the people we don't like. And be friends with people who like to do that as well. Like Putin and other fascists and dictators. So, this is Meno's position. But Socrates, when faced with it, says, hey, let me show you a different way of doing it. Let's reflect on ourselves. And by the way, we're not reflecting on our image of ourselves. I'm going to start by saying I don't know. Me, Socrates, doesn't know. That's not going to stop us. I'm saying I don't know, but then I'm immediately following it up with let's follow the logos. What does that mean? The kind of self-reflection that they're engaging in is not on their image of themselves. Now Meno Socrates said, oh yeah, you're calling me a flat-headed stingray. It's only because you're beautiful and you want me to compliment you. When we play that game of, what do we both look like? His image of himself. So a kind of self-reflection that does not involve an image of yourself. Socrates does this all the time. He said in the Phaedo, he says, we read, it's easy to disagree with Socrates. It's hard to disagree with the truth. So let's get back into our dialectic and focus on the truth rather than who's right or who's wrong. It's not a who question. Philosophy isn't a who question. That's about authority. That's the kind of immaturity that we need to address and purify ourselves from through philosophical midwifery. Truth is not a who question. It's not an authority question. It's a what question. What makes it true? So that's the first thing that Socrates is introducing, a kind of new way of reflecting on yourself that's foreign to most people, including Meno. Number 2, a state of mind, which is the opposite of certainty, which again is foreign to most people. Most people see this lack of certainty or inability to talk, being completely puzzled, at a loss, as a bad thing. How can you act like an expert? How can you lecture? How can you give speeches at church for 3 hours like all of these preachers do if you can't say anything? How can you have a professional opinion, have a podcast or life coaching course or psychotherapist who talks about their opinions with other people continuously all day and gets a lot of money for it? How can you do any of that if you are completely at a loss? So a new state of mind that we are calling being stung, or in the Greek, aporia. Puzzled, stung, at a loss. New kind of ousia, or self-reflection, a new kind of state of mind, and a new kind of logos. When we are trying to understand, we don't just quote poets we like. We don't just use words to attack each other or belittle each other or own each other in a debate. We are specifically trying to learn a use of language called the dialectic that allows us to gain understanding. It allows us to be able to define things. So these modern philosophers, which are really just lovers of opinions, and with the title philosophers, yes, they can use their familiarity with reason to show other people's false beliefs are false. And that can be good at times, to speak truth to power. And to maybe even sometimes if somebody's acting in a really terrible way and is completely void of self-reflection, maybe that kind of humiliation to someone like Trump might be beneficial. I'm not sure. So they can do that, but what can't they do? They can't come to an answer. They can't answer anything. Even these philosophers who can shoot down the crappy arguments, they never come to an answer themselves. They can't. They're left with, well, your beliefs are terrible, but who knows what's true? Who knows the true nature of God? Who knows what we should do? Who knows what's ethical? Let's just engage in a distraction of another philosophical bubblegum problem. Like, ooh, let's do that trolley experiment. If there were people on train tracks and the trolley problem, and there were 4 people, and you could change the track of the train or the trolley so that it would not hit those 4 people but hit somebody else and kill 1 person, would you do it? They don't even have an answer to that. Some people think this. Hegel would say this. Kant would say this. A relativist would say this. And a utilitarian would say this. Who cares? So that's their issue. While they might be able to point out what's false and terrible beliefs, they still don't reach the level of understanding. They can't define what self-virtue is. They can't define what being is. They can't define anything. Why? Simple. In order to define, you'd have to follow the paradigm that Socrates is laying out. And nobody reads Socrates, at least not in the way that we do. All of the past translations of Socrates have been garbage. All of the ways I've seen Socrates taught have itself been garbage. What we are learning on this channel is a new way of reading that's needed to be able to understand, come to conclusions, reach definitions. So we're not running around in circles, because you know what happens when we're running around in circles? Those people who the philosophers debate against, who are certain in their ignorance, they take charge. That was the recent American election. These nothing relativists of Kamala, represented loosely with Kamala Harris, who don't do anything, who don't make an actual stand about what's actually true, objectively beneficial. They can't say for certain. All they can do is make compromises. Kamala's whole campaign was compromising with the right. Let's be fascist too. Because won't that get more votes if we help a little bit, but we're not going to address the problems of capitalism. We're not going to address the problems of wealth inequality. We're not going to fundamentally help anyone. Maybe, I don't know, we'll give, I don't know, some money to childcare. But also we're going to do some fascism. We're going to attack immigrants and blame women and support genocide as well. Because, right? Shouldn't we appeal to everyone? If that happens, those actual fascists who are certain, even though they're certain in their ignorance, take over. So the significance of people claiming to be philosophers actually learning the logos and dialectic is so they can actually do something, so they can actually come to a conclusion, so they can put these conversations to rest. Finally, like we call it a political football, when there's a problem that needs to be addressed, but politicians don't care about solving problems right now. That would involve an understanding of the logos and pathologos, or at least a kind of maturity and rationality where you reflect on the cause of problems and you have some empathy to actually want to solve them. But that never happens. Almost never happens. Maybe once or twice it's happened. Instead, they have this expression called a political football. Oh, women's rights? Yes, yes, yes. Let's kick that ball around for a while and never actually put it to bed. come to a conclusion about what's true and beneficial. Why? Well, distraction. Lets me keep my job. I can be my professional opinion haver. I can get my money, pour my money into my stock portfolio and buy another few more houses while everybody else suffers from the consequences of us hoarding wealth as politicians. That's what happens. That's what happens politically. And as these philosophers, these debates with Christians are a political football. How many more debates with Christians you want to have? In which nobody changes their mind. And nobody reaches truth. You want to use the most important things, understanding the nature of self and reality and our highest virtue. You're going to use that as a philosophical football? Philodoxia football? So that's the significance of what Socrates is helping us understand for ourselves. And he's not teaching it to us. He's not saying it in that way. He's not laying it out in that way. And I guess the reason I'm laying it out in that way is because if you are following along, then you're, 28 episodes in? You've been reading. So this summary and conclusion will make sense to you. You can't send an email to Alex and say, hey, by the way, there's this thing called the logos, and you're actually doing harm when you think you're doing good, and you're not doing philosophy at all. What you need to do is learn the logos. And what you'll be able to do is help yourself engage in dialectic, which is a way of using language where you can actually benefit people, introduce them into a new way of self-reflection, ousia, a new state of mind, stung or aporia, and help them learn to use the logos. And by the way, that learning of the logos is not just what true philosophy is, it's what it means to be a human being. It's true rationality, maturity, and it's our destiny. You can't say that to someone, because these are all conclusions that we've come to through reading together on the channel. We had to be puzzled. We had to reflect. We had to spend all of this time we've been spending in this podcast to figure out the logos, to practice the dialectics. So, with a recognition of that, we are gaining more personal experience about the very question of this text. Can virtue be taught? All of that is more experience of whether or not it can be taught. So, from that reflection, we've come to... I've replaced my mouse, by the way, so I promised I would. Socrates is introducing... Okay. I just need to fix... All right, I'm back. I fixed my pen. So we are in the wrong blackboard. You want to be in the Meno. That's the midwifery one. Okay, so Socrates is, that's very big. That's even still big. All right, who cares? I thought 22 was the... Anyway. Socrates' art And also we can wonder about what's that related to virtue? It's a question that we can carry. What is he doing that we don't see done anywhere else? He is introducing There you go. That's so thick. Okay. He is introducing and encouraging but also, as he's been saying, if I'm making you stung, it's only because I am first stung myself. So we also say, and modeling. Or because we are interested in the dialectic, demonstrating what? Self-reflection. What we call ousia. Also, a stung, puzzled, bewildered. So open-minded that you're completely bewildered. State of mind. Which we call aporia. And also, he is spending a lot of time introducing, encouraging, and modeling or demonstrating the dialectic. He calls it a paradigm of using language, of using speech, of using thinking, of using logos. So these are fundamental parts of his art. He's also mentioned a key point. He's mentioned that all of this way of being is in order that it... Remember when Meno said, "Oh, give me the answers," and Socrates says, well, actually, let's read it in text. When Socrates pointed out that he doesn't really understand how to define things, or how to come to a conclusion, or how to understand, he said, "Hey, Meno, here's that part we mentioned earlier, the heuristic antagonistic kind of idea of philosophia. There's the philos, that's the sophia. So even back then, he was able to recognize the very problem we deal with in philosophy today. People who claim to be wise, philos, and claim to be friends, sophia. Sorry, philos is the friends word here, and sophia is wise. That's literally philosophia, philosophy. They're actually of a heuristic, which means using words to weasel words to win arguments, even though it's not true. And antagonistic. So our friend Alex antagonizing these very ignorant people on his podcast. yes, they are self-righteously ignorant, and yes, they're doing harm, and yes, they are, you know, obviously the dad is the son is copying his father, so the harm is being passed down not only within society but within the family. But he is still antagonizing. Doesn't really seem to be helping. At least not their souls. So these people, they have to take up the logos to refute him. But if you are a true friend, you would use a more gentle way of dialectic. Now you might say, well, yeah, that's what Alex is doing. He's saying, hey, you claim to know, and you guys don't seem to give a crap about what's true. You just like to be to cosplay as a wise person, as you quote terribly from this book just to justify your beliefs. You have to take up the logos and refute me. I said, well, isn't that what Alex is doing? You guys claim to be rational, then use reason to refute me making simple statements about how terrible your book is, how immoral your book is, how disgusting the things claimed to be done in the idea of from the idea of a loving God are. All right, you can make that claim. But what about this other one, this more gentle way of discoursing with each other as Socrates is doing now? A more gentle way, more in the way of the dialectician. The way of the dialectician. So, what is the difference? Well, it's not only the truth, but to proceed by means of those premises which the one who is questioning acknowledges they know. So Alex would have to say, okay, this is where you're at. I can ask you, I can get you to talk a little bit so we can see where you're at. But now I need to ask you questions in order to get you to the next point. Can you acknowledge you know this? Okay, then that's a premise we can build on. Okay, what about the next step? Are we all in agreement? We're not throwing opinions at each other. We're not here to embarrass each other. We're not here to humiliate each other. We're not here to defend whatever dumb beliefs we both all of us walked in with. We are all in that open-minded state of curiosity. We're all going to start with, hey, I don't know it right now, at least. Let's follow it. Let's follow the logos. So follow by means of those premises, which one who is questioning acknowledges they know. So there has to be a kind of a leader. So Alex would have to be a leader in that particular one. And again, I'm just using this as an example. It's something that anyone can see. And odds are, if you're following this if you subscribe to this podcast, YouTube might recommend an Alex O'Connor, I think his name is, philosophy video every now and again. You probably see something like this. But it's not just him, it's everyone else. All other so-called philosophers. You could apply this to. And ourselves. It can be very frustrating talking to those sorts of people. So hey, just follow reason. Why don't you? There seems to be a more gentle way, which is the way of the dialectician. To acknowledge that you have an art that they don't have. To acknowledge, hey, Alex or whoever it is, you're not the same as these people. They are not familiar with reflection. They're not familiar with open-mindedness. They are not familiar with being stung or self-reflection or reason. Acknowledge you're better, which can be hard to do in our world where without the logos, how do you judge what is better or worse? Isn't every opinion equally valid? No. Alex would have to acknowledge he's better and use this art or way of the dialectician. The art of the dialectician. And by the way, Meno, that's the way I'm going to endeavor to converse with you. This is my goal. It's what I'm aiming for. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, if it's going to be successful, but I'm going to use this. The gentle way, the way of the dialectician, which is a way that you treat friends, true friends. Philos, true lovers. Lovers of what? Philosophia, lovers of wisdom. Philologos, lovers of logos. Philodianoia, lovers of true understanding. All right, so after he gives a demonstration of how to do this logos, this dialectic, Meno just says what would rather demand some answers. Socrates calls him overbearing and tyrannical and a spoiled brat. But then we're on page 9 here. Oh yes, and then after he tries again, so again, every point of this conversation, Meno hits a limit, has a counterattack, retaliates, and Socrates says, hey, by the way, I'm going to make a little joke, diffuse your situation, and then invite you back into the dialectic, back into the logos. So we can say this is the way of the dialectic. And what we've been learning to get on this channel is human beings are a walking dialectic. Our lives are a walking dialectic. The art of the dialectic is what we're here to master. And if that's our purpose, to master the art of the dialectic, then you could say, well, wouldn't our purpose or destiny to master what is most fundamental to being a human being? Of course, the destiny of a human being, the destiny of man. So if the destiny of man is to master the art of dialectic, might we even take the next step and say, therefore, the true nature of a human being is one in a dialectic. So to gain mastery of the dialectic is nothing other than to gain the excellence or virtue of a human being. We are always a walking dialectic. It's either in the logos or a slave to our pathologos. It's either, as we are encouraging Alex and other people to do, be a master of the conversation, learn the art and practice it. Don't just give equal time for your opinion and then pass it over to their opinion and then they say their opinion and back and forth, 50-50, like every political debate, bullcrap that we see on TV where nothing happens, nothing gets concluded, no one changes. It's not like that. It's more like someone with an art. A doctor doesn't allow the patient's opinions to have equal validity, doesn't allow the patient to talk for equally as much time. No. Use an art. And if that's the case, if we are ourselves a walking dialectic, if we are in a relationship with either the pathologos, the false idea of the self, or what Socrates is helping us to get into, the actual logos, the actual self logos, then it makes sense of what Socrates has been saying in the Phaedo, that our purpose is the education and nurture in the art of the dialectic, which is what he calls the true self-study of philosophy. It makes sense. If we are a walking dialectic, if that's what it means to be a human being, then our destiny would be to master that as an art. What's an art? Well, you have to have some knowledge, you have to have some understanding, you have to have some skill, but fundamentally it has to be of benefit. These things that Socrates is outlining have to all be of benefit. And does that help our question? Is that virtue? Is the excellence of the human being the same, no different than the art of the dialectic? All of these ideas we seem to be building a nice, a mind map, where all of these ideas we're seeing about virtue, being open-minded and stung, some kind of new self-reflection, letting go of what's false, letting go of the heuristic and antagonistic use of language, letting go of that certainty, not getting into name calling and bratty tyrannical behavior as a way of stopping the logos, following the logos, the art of the dialectic, benefit. All of these things are all things that seem to be tied to the fundamental question that we are carrying: what the heck is virtue? And how do we get it? So, moving on to page 10, it's theatrically tragic that Meno has never experienced the realm of being. It can be very difficult. We've been talking about how a lot of people who don't reflect at all, they don't use the logos or reasoning at all, they don't be in an open, stung state of mind at all. There's no way that they can reach being, of course, but even those people claiming to be philosophers who never come to a conclusion, never go beyond their own opinions, all they can say is, who's to say? Oh, but that's crazy. But what's true? I don't know. These are things that would inevitably follow if their education does not involve being initiated into the mysteries. So this is a fundamental problem with these, I don't know what to call them, philodoxias, modern philosophers. They never come to a conclusion. How can they? Because they don't have a standard for truth. They can point to things that they like empathy or understanding or reason, but how can they make a case that it's absolutely always true and therefore principles that we should all be focused on and use as a paradigm to recognize deviations from, to recognize illnesses of the soul that we can follow to become mature and rational, overcome our problems, and reach our highest virtue or excellence or destiny? How can they do any of that if they haven't had the experience, or at least an understanding of, being? That which is eternal, that which is true, that which is the fundamental principles of everything that flows from it, including our physical world. So this is why he calls it theatrically tragic, O Meno, that you left your education before the mysteries, and therefore you haven't been initiated. Education is fundamentally a spiritual discipline, in that our understanding is of being, leading up to an experience of being, and then an understanding of that, and then development of that, and so on and so on. So, if Meno doesn't know that, then he'll just demand opinions. That's our modern idea of schooling. Here's a textbook, here is all the right answers, pour it into your brain like a piggy bank, the piggy bank model of education they call it. That's what Meno wants. Surely education can't be some sort of training that we have to do ourselves. We have to understand definition and practice demonstration, or a walking dialectic, because definition and demonstration are the first two categories of the dialectic, and do it at all times, there's our third, so that we come to truth, there's our fourth. That can't be the four parts of the dialectic. That can't be true education, surely. A kind of self-training of our self-dialectic, leading up to our own understanding for ourselves, not belief in any way, and confirming that understanding in direct experience of the realm of being. Surely that can't be education, because that involves a dimension beyond the senses, and you can't put that in a test tube. So how can you prove it? Easy. Understanding and experience. Dianoia and nous. But without that, you'll be like Meno. I will stay Socrates if you give me many answers. Isn't that what learning is? Isn't that what I paid money for you at university for? Isn't that what I subscribe to the life coaching, alpha, red pill podcast, whatever, to get answers of how to become successful? Socrates' response to that is, I'm not lacking in eagerness. To give you answers, but for your sake, for your benefit and my own, I will not be able to give you many such answers in that way. Instead, come along then. Right? I'm not doing that. I'm not playing that game. I'm not compromising with your ignorance. But instead, what does he do? Come along then. Another invitation into the human quest, the hero's journey. Being rational, the thing we're here for. Hey, I'm not going to do that crappy thing that's based in ignorance, But hey, let's play the real game. Isn't that interesting? He's always inviting him back. He doesn't end it. He doesn't own him in a debate and then walk away smug. Every stage, come along then. Come back and let's go again. Let's go again from the beginning. Let's start again. Now try again. Over and over. Use the paradigm again. Try the paradigm one more time. Come along then. You must fulfill your promise. And he uses various different ways of getting, hey, you promised to give it a try. So that's one reason. So there's a kind of encouragement. Now, for people who might be really into this podcast and maybe really into philosophy and the logos, which is what's drawn you to this podcast, that might be strange. To me, it's strange. For me, I don't really need a lot of encouragement. I want to do this all the time anyway. I think I was born weird in that way. But for most people, that is rare. That's weird. They need encouragement. Hey, you promised to try the dialectic. Come on, let's do it. So before, hey, you're really beautiful. That's why you're calling me a flathead. Ha ha ha. Now that you feel good about yourself, because I've said this, you're really beautiful. Hey, let's build on that good state of mind and do some dialectic, do some logos. What we're here for as human beings, our purpose. Join the game, the true game. So some people know of Alan Watts, and his one of his many talks, or several of his many talks, his way of making sense of the human condition is we're here to play. It's a game. And of course, he was really close friends with Pierre Grimes, who we read on this channel. We read his work in philosophical midwifery, and soon we'll be reading some of his other texts, which are freaking amazing. He upgrades that and says, by the way, if we're here to play, philosophy is the noblest game. That's his quote. And I would take that and run with it and say, hey, it's the only game. Yes, Alan, we're here to play. Yes, Pierre, we're here to play the noblest game called philosophy. But really, the dialectic is the only game in town. Because you're playing it whether you like it or not. If you are not doing it consciously, if you're not taking all of these invitations Socrates is giving us over and over, you are being a slave to a dialectic of your false belief of yourself called the pathologos. That's your life. The opposite of virtue. Or you can take Socrates' invitation, become a master. What does it mean to be a master? To gain that understanding, dianoia, and that experience of the ideal nous. Integrate the two into a art that benefits. That's mastery. So it's the noblest game, but it's the only game in town, really. That's also the paradigm or the archetype for the hero's journey. And I've lost my sound drops.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So we do those sound drops when we point to the fact that it's the archetype of the hero's journey. All other journeys is a shadow of, or are picking out pieces from, this. So we can be really grateful that time and time again Socrates says, come along then, and invites us back in. But also he is demonstrating what it would mean to have that art. So having a mastery of the art is not just accepting the invitation whenever the invitation to participate in the logos and dialectic is on the table with someone, especially when it's Socrates giving the invitation. It's also being an inviter yourself. If Socrates is demonstrating what this true virtue is, maybe, and he is artfully deflecting every time Meno tries to block the logos. Like here he says, well, what if I say that I don't know what color color is. He goes, well, okay, well, if you did that, and you can go down that road, you'd be a jerk. You'd be one of those people who claim to be philosophers, but they're not. They just use language in a heuristic and antagonistic kind. And if you did that, I'd say, I've already given you my answer. If you're disagreeing, you have to take up the logos and prove me wrong. But I'm not going to do that because, hey, there's another road you can take, Meno. So a kind of clever invitation to the best road. If you were really my friends, I'd be more gentle with you. I wouldn't want to be on Socrates' bad side. So clever way of diffusing his pathologos block or counterattack to the logos and inviting him to be friends, to participate in a discourse that is more gentle than that, which is called the way of the dialectician. And when he called him a flathead, oh, you're so beautiful. That's why you want to play that game of similes or likenesses to appearances, because your appearance is amazing. Now that you feel good about yourself, let's get back into the logos. Well, I can't do it because I think that that the example of the dialectic that was physical and not about being, I think that was the best one I think that's the best answer. Socrates' response, oh, that's because you haven't been initiated into the realm of being yet. It's tragic because that's not really education. That's something else. Being taught to be a slave. We know this of our world today. We know that our current education system is bollocks and garbage. All it is just abusing children to make them soulless cogs in a machine of their own slavery. It's capitalism. We know this. This isn't a surprise to us. What we don't know is how it's the case and what would the ideal be. We know what we're doing, we just don't know why. It's because we have not understood our true education is because we're a in-souled being. We're not machines within a capitalist mechanism of enslavement and exploitation. That's not what we are. We have a soul. We have states of mind. We have ousia. We can experience being. We are of the self. We are the self, which is beyond even being. So education should be about all that stuff. Pretending we're not those things is literally crushing the logos. It's pathologos based. So when Meno responds in that way, hey, it's tragic, you haven't been initiated, but hang on, come along then, let's get into it. Oh, you promised me you'd try anyway, so you must fulfill your promise by telling me what virtue is as a whole. Let's get back to the question. Same question. He said, oh, Meno, do you think you can teach people to be good like me? Hang on a second, like you don't know what virtue is. How can you ask me what its qualities are? If you didn't know Meno, could you say whether he's handsome or not? If you don't know virtue, how can you ask its qualities, whether or not it's teachable? So still, you haven't told me what virtue is. But come along and try again. And by the way, I can make a joke. Remember that joke that we make when someone breaks a glass at a party and you say, stop making many out of the one. Isn't that funny? A funny philosophy joke? Breaking a glass and making many out of the one. We think it's funny, don't we? Meno, because we're philosophers and we want to go from the many to the one. So, by the way, now that I made that joke, keep virtue as one, whole and sound, and use the paradigm that I've given you. So not just come back to the logos, but use the dialectic paradigm that we are learning. Over and over and over again, he's using charm and jokes, and sometimes like, hey, if you went down this road, I'd probably be meaner to you. So lots and lots of different ways. So what we might call a very, very brilliant bedside manner. And he's only using his charm or his humor to invite people back into the logos and ideally the paradigm of the logos, the dialectic. So sometimes we get people on this channel who come in and they make jokes, which isn't a bad thing. It can be great if it highlights the significance of what we see, but every now and again we get people who make a joke that's just a tangent, or maybe jokes about philosophy, or is just crude, easy jokes, low-hanging fruit. And it's only happened a few times, but I say to those people, hey, use of humor is great. It's very much part of the art that Socrates has, but use it in a way that benefits. What we are reading here is exactly that. He's only using his humor and his jokes and his way of like deflecting self-criticism and saying, well, I don't know. And by the way, you can tell everyone I don't know what virtue is because I haven't met anyone who knows. So a kind of courage and bravery and forcefulness, even then, all of these aspects of his personality, qualities of charm, humor, are always in service of inviting someone back to the logos and encouraging them to use the dialectic paradigm. That's it. Not using his charm for wealth or fame or Instagram clicks or become a Elon Musk rich person or get famous or win presidency or become a tyrant or become an alpha with a harem of Instagram models. Not only the one thing. He's using all of his wonderful personality traits and vision and seeing and art and maybe even virtue, if that's what it turns out to be, just to encourage people to follow the logos with the dialectic. Isn't that interesting? That's someone who even people who haven't read Socrates kind of have heard that he's the smartest person or the wisest person or the father of Western thought. Everything since Socrates is but a footnote to Socrates is a quote that I read somewhere or heard on somewhere. Isn't it interesting that this wisest of men or greatest of men use all of his charm and personality traits and goodnesses to invite people to follow the logos with the dialectic? Is that interesting? That you can summarize him so simply? Of course, we could take that glass and break it into pieces and see there are many aspects of it, many parts of the dialectic, many different ways of diffusing situations. You could learn midwifery to recognize the nature of counterattacks and maybe even help people understand what their pathologos is. There's lots of different aspects to it, but you can bring it together as a whole like we're seeing here. Keep it whole and sound and say the virtue that he is exercising at least is, come along then. Use the paradigm of the logos. Simple. Is it? What's the significance of seeing it simply? If we have many aspects of ourselves, we have many interests. Maybe some of us have like humor or like comedy. Many of us are good at staying courageous when we're insulted or diffusing attacks or good at making friends or good at using words like those people we've been talking about today. So the many different qualities you can have. What's the significance about having a single focus for all of them, using all of them for one goal? What would happen? Would they support each other? Would they complement each other? Would they build each other? Would there be a kind of gestalt or a synergy where your charm would help your use of words, which would help your use of making friends, would help your other interests because they're all focused on the same goal? What would that do to your psyche, to your soul? So that's a question we can wonder about. It's right on the board. This is part of reading. Another question. Put it next to this. Question. What's What would the significance or effect on our psyche, mind, or psyche is often talked, our soul. Psyche is another word for soul, but you can also say or mind, or self. What would the significance or effect on our psyche, soul, or mind, or self be if each part, quality, or to use a self-logos term, aspect, which is the word eidos. So we are interested in, we said that courage and holiness and temperance, all of these virtues are eidos, real beings, or aspect of the whole of being, or parts or aspects of being. So if being is mind, which is of the self, we could say we also have parts or qualities or aspects within ourselves, interests, skills, traits, qualities, charm, friendliness, humor. What would the significance or effect on our psyche, soul, or mind, or self be if each part, quality, or aspect is unified and focused on and focused on the one single what would we say? Purpose? Goal? Functioning? Which of those fit to Socrates inviting him and us again and again into the Logos and to use the dialectic paradigm? Is it our purpose? Is that what he's doing? Is it a purpose? Is it a goal? Is it how he's functioning? What do you think? There's our question. Carrying it with us. Because to carry a question is to be on a quest. So he has another go. Of course, he doesn't use the paradigm. He just quotes a poet he likes, very much like religious people do, or non-religious people, like those philodoxias who quote various philosophers they like. Well, Nietzsche said this, or Hegel wrote this book and he said this, and Heidegger said this, and just quotes. The Bible says this. The Quran says this. The Book of Mormon says this. Trump says this. The Founding Fathers says this. Who cares? No one's going to agree that that's actually true. They're just quoting someone who already agrees with something that you think is true already. So he didn't do very well, but very, very, very common. As true today as it was then. What's the significance of that? What's the significance of the very same person he's talking to represents 99% of people today? The very problems that Socrates is outlining for us then are the exact same problems we need to face today. What's the significance of that? Make that another question. You write that one down. Don't be a beautiful, spoiled, tyrannical brat like Meno and get me to write that one on the board as well. You do one. You write that one down. What's the significance of that? As true today, as brilliantly insightful and a fantastic characterization of the difficulties we face individually and collectively, even today. What does that mean about our history, our learning, where we are now, about Socrates' vision, about what the vision of someone with the art of the dialectic might have to be able to see all of that so clearly and simply and communicate it and communicate to us through time? Is there a timeless quality to the art of the dialectician? There better be, if it's our job here. There better be something we can take with us out of this incarnation. It better be timeless. And it better be universal for us to be an art you could apply to anybody. Even in this world, a Meno, an Ion, a Phaedo, all these people Socrates talked with, your crazy Aunt Betty, your best friend Tim, your philosopher buddy Barry. It better be universally applicable. And if it's truth, it better be universal. But also, it better be an art we can take with us. So all of these, any one of those that really stood out at you, that made you curious, that made you stung, that made you aporia, that made you reflect on yourself in a way that you weren't immediately before it, grab it, write it down, and share it in the comment section of the video if you want. I'm not going to do that one on the board. And if you are demanding I do, I will say, well, you must be really beautiful, because only beautiful people can make tyrannical demands like that. The same way Socrates said that to Meno. All right, so he says, I'm not lacking in eagerness, but for your sake and my own. What's that called? So back to our notes here. Whoops, this way. Back to what we're saying here. Let's move this up here. So what's Socrates doing with this art that he is maybe unified his purpose or goal and functioning towards? Move that over here. I'm enjoying this new mouse, by the way. It's much smoother. It doesn't get stuck like the other one. So that's art that he's using, that he's inviting you back to the logos and as much as he can, and to use the paradigm as well. What's he doing? Introducing it. He's introducing the paradigm. He's encouraging us to use it and Meno to use it all the time. He's also using it himself, so he's modeling or demonstrating it. By the way, can you turn that into a dialectic? You've been given 3 parts and you've been given demonstration. What does that mean? That means there's a potential puzzle here. Why? If demonstration is here, push the implication. Which of these is definition? Which of these is division? Which of these is conclusion? And if we've only got 3 and you've recognized that there is an inherent paradigm or structure behind it, you can fill in the bottom one. So if you realize that there are 3 and one of them is one of the DDAS or DDAC, we say DD, definition, demonstration, division, conclusion, then that means you can turn that 3 into a 4. So maybe we're missing one. He's introducing, encouraging, and demonstrating. Maybe he's doing a 4th thing. You find it. And by the way, maybe you don't use the word introducing and encouraging. Use the dialectic terms. Maybe define it better. The way that we changed modeling into demonstrating. Or maybe keep both. That's the game. That's playing. That's what Alan Watts calls the game that we're here to play. That's what Pierre Grimes, his close friend, calls the Noblest Game. That's what we are saying, the only real game in town. And that's why Haggard says to us,
You're a wizard, Harry.
because it's the true hero's journey. So using all of this, encouraging, what's he doing? He's functioning in this way towards what? Encouraging his focus or goal or purpose. Oh, maybe there are 4 here. Maybe there's a 4th one here. And you can rephrase these 4 in terms of the dialectic. In fact, do it. Why? That's the paradigm. So Socrates is encouraging the self-reflection. You'd have to reflect on what we just said. He's encouraging a state of mind of being stung or puzzled. So if I've just given you if you recognize that there's a puzzle here, there's 3 parts that could be a 4 of the dialectic, then that's a question. Over here, there's 4, his functioning, his goal, his purpose. Oh, so if you are curious about the correct answer to that, now you're stung. And by the way, now that you are reflecting and so that's a kind of self-reflection. And so there's your functioning, or that your primary functioning, and you're doing so in a state of aporia or stung or open-mindedness or puzzlement or having a question, then how do you solve the question? You need to be doing this to get the question, you need to be doing this to get the question, and now that you've got the question, you need to be doing this to get the answer. So how do we get the answer? Take those 3 and use the dialectic paradigm on the logos. These are logos. These are questions, purpose, goal, functioning. These are high uses of words that reflect the self-logos. The soul is a self-logos word. Mind, self. We talked about aspects or eidos. These are all fundamental self-logos terms. How do you solve the puzzle? Apply the dialectic. What's Socrates doing to Meno over and over again? Take these self-logos goals we have, defining virtue. Take all of these self-logos terms we have, beautiful, good, justice, courage, and apply the dialectic paradigm. So if that's what he's encouraging us to do, we can do it. We can practice it. Take these. Can you take, is it purpose, is it goal, is it functioning, or is it 4? Reflecting the structure of the dialectic. Same thing here. So, maybe there's a question here. Maybe there's a question here, but I'm going to do the middle one. Because we have one here, we have one here. We have one here, self-reflection or ousia. We have 2 here, a state of mind of being stung or puzzled or questioning or at a loss, aporia. We have number 3 here, using the dialectical paradigm. And finally, we've pulled from the text a 4th term, both for your sake and my own, I'm doing this. So there's his goal or conclusion or final purpose or something like that. Final cause. So we can take that final cause. He's doing it for his sake and his own sake. What's that called? So this is all this is done for your sake and my own. Again, pulling the logos terms from the text, recognizing there's a 3, which might be a 4, using the text to pull out the clues, and using the dialectical paradigm to structure it. And why are we doing all this? Because I think that I will. I'm doing this because I think I will. Benefit. To do it for my sake and for your own listeners here, members of the community. That means to benefit. benefit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe there's more. But this seems to be the unified functioning that Socrates is doing again and again with all of his qualities, his charm, his humor, his joking, his diffusing, his being charismatic and cool. He's doing it in order to encourage self-reflection for Meno in a way that's never been done before, and we need to practice ourselves and encourage other philosophers to do the same. To help Meno get into a state of being stung. By the way, Socrates says that I'm in this more than you. I'm far more than you. You're saying that you can't speak. Well, I don't know whether you're being honest or not. Maybe you're just resembling someone who's stung, but I am stung. I am self-reflecting. Well, and that would follow, right? He said, I don't know what virtue is, but let's find it out. So he's not starting with certainty. He's starting with a reflection. In a state of wonderment, he is using the dialectic as much as he can, such that he is giving us what we need to learn it ourselves. So is he teaching virtue? I don't know. He's certainly demonstrating it, or demonstrating parts of it, essential part of it. And he's doing it because it not only benefits Meno, but it benefits Socrates' own self. So what's the single focus use of our psyche, soul, mind, self, being that we can do if we were modeling ourselves after Socrates? Or if we, not because we're modeling ourselves after him, but because we've understood we are always in a dialectic, because it's the noblest game and the only game in town. We're in it anyway. And if it's our purpose would therefore be to have mastership over what we're doing. Otherwise, you're a slave to being in a dialectic to the pathologos, which is of what's false, causing your problems, blocking the logos, like Meno is being blocked. Like those people in that podcast were blocked. So if we can recognize that, hey, we're in it, the human condition is the dialectic. Therefore, our purpose, our highest goal, or our destiny would be to master it. Don't be a slave to a bad master, the pathologos, but develop self-mastery yourself, which is following the logos. How? In self-reflection. In what state of mind? Aporia, stung. But in what way? Using the dialectic. Why do that? Because it will benefit you in the highest way, because it will help you reach it is your destiny. What a fantastic insight to come to. How do we get that insight? Well, we had to spend this episode reflecting. Didn't even have to read any further. We were reflecting on what we've already read. We had to look for questions. We got one over here. We got one over here. We got one right here. So there's our wondering and puzzlement. Once we pulled out enough terms that we're wondering about from our reflection, we had to look for the dialectical paradigm, look for a 3 or a 4 so we could finish it out, look for a demonstration so we could fill in what the other ones were. And why did we do it? Because we understand it's what most benefits. And that's what Socrates is doing all the way through. What do we say about that? We say,
I don't want to eat a monkey.
We say, I don't want to eat a monkey.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
I want to do this instead.
Wow.
Hooray. Let's keep going a little bit further. Use the paradigm. He has a go. He quotes that thing that is silly. Socrates doesn't knock it down the way I did. He said, oh, by the way, when you say rejoice in beautiful and be able, desire beautiful things, do you really mean good? Okay, so he's using it. He's not shutting him down. He's asking him a question. Do you agree on this premise and this one? He's leading the conversation. He's helping him adjust his point of view. He says, by the way, he comes to a conclusion. No one desires the bad. Because if desiring the bad and making it your own makes you harm. You get harmed with having bad things. By the way, people who are harmed are miserable, aren't they? And also become mean-spirited or become the worst kind of person, a cacodemon, bad daemon. Function terribly, which is the reflection of the pathologos, the negative logos, the cacodemon. You start to believe the pathologos more. You become miserable and you become a slave to the pathologos. So we talk about we are either in a positive or negative dialectic. Another way of saying that is, what's the ideal functioning of what's the voice of the self that communicates our benefit? You could say that's the logos or the daemon. That which helps guide us personally to follow the logos in the way that Socrates is outlining. That is the eudaimonia, the good daemon. But what's the one that gets in the way that causes our problems? The kakodaemon. So we say if we are either in a positive or negative dialectic, we are either a master ourselves and we become ourselves a good daemon and happy, because eudaimonia is another way of saying happy as well. Or we become miserable because we are a slave to the kakodaemon, the negative, blocking, insulting, diminishing inner self-talk of the pathologos. And no one wants to be miserable and be a slave to the pathologos or the kakodaemon. So why would anyone want anything bad? Therefore, you can't say someone is more excellent because they want good things. Because everyone wants good things. No one wants bad things. So this idea of harming your enemies might not be possible now if everyone seeks the good. And those who seek the bad are just because they have been tricked through beliefs and they haven't recognized for themselves. So part of the question of can virtue be taught is, well, if teaching is involved the piggy bank model of pouring beliefs into your head, that can't be virtue because people can be tricked into desiring bad things, becoming miserable and a slave to the kakodaemon because they are, where is it? Led to believe. So it can't be a belief. Hi, welcome to the chat, Nitro. It must be something to do with understanding or, where's the word? Recognition here. So, hey, by doing what we've been doing today, have we been developing an understanding to see it for ourselves or recognize it? Yes. We're not being fed beliefs like Meno was demanding earlier. Give me all the beliefs. Give me Hegel's beliefs and Kant's beliefs so I can sound really smart. No. All right, and so one of those false beliefs was, hey, virtue is harming your enemies. There are no enemies. People's problems, the reason people desire bad things is because they are suffering from false beliefs and they haven't learned understanding yet, which might be why Socrates seems to be so focused on the unified functioning of doing this, encouraging self-reflection in a state of puzzlement, using the logos and dialectic for benefit. By the way, this is also the conditions for understanding or dianoia. Another reason why Socrates might want to use all of his charms and his abilities to do this all the time. There aren't bad people, there are people suffering from false beliefs and haven't yet developed this. Whoops. The art of the dialectic. So anyone who thinks, putting people in prison or genociding people or enslaving people or keeping people in poverty or invading people is the way of actually being good is fundamentally wrong. Just wrong. Suffering from ignorance. Why? Because these bad people who you hate are just people who have not learned this. So what do we have to do? Create the conditions that will help them learn this. What does Socrates do every time Meno sparks up at him and attacks him or insults him? He says, oh, that's interesting. Let's make a joke about that, or maybe give you a compliment. And now let's get back to this. Let's get back to this. Let's reflect again. Let's follow the logos again. Oh, by the way, you want to use the paradigm? Because we'd both benefit that way. Well, me encouraging you to do that is my benefit. Interesting? Yes, very. So from there, we have a new we've refined our definition. Accordingly then, according to the logos, what Meno thinks virtue is the power of, because everyone seeks good things, so the only people are better or worse only in their ability to get the good things. The ability to get good. Now, okay, good what? Meno, of course, because of his problem, a problem that most people have even today, they're only familiar with the physical world. So if virtue is the ability to get good, what they think is good, gold and silver and honors and offices, right? Get famous, get positions of power, get the good job, get the monies. Get the monies, get the monies, get the monies. Is that all you think is good? What about the good things of being? The eidos? What about the whole of being? What about the self? What about everything we've outlined here? Is that good? And Meno says, nah, just those things. Just money and fame and offices. What does Socrates do? Does he own him? Does he use all of his understanding of not only Meno's problem, but his fundamental nature of his ignorance to own him and humiliate him and get him more entrenched in his problem and get him hating the philosophy and the logos? I hope not, because we're only 13 pages in of 48, so I hope he doesn't get him to hate the logos like debaters do now. He doesn't. He rolls with it. Very well, he says. Very well. All right, very well. Let's keep going. Let's push the implications of that and see where the logos tell. I'm not going to say you're wrong and you're an idiot and how dare you. How dare you? As, people are wanted to do now. I say, oh, very well. Let's, by the way, I'm going to use that and see where the logos takes us. When you say to provide gold and silver as virtue, by the way, have you ever reflected on the fact that you are family friends with the king of Persia, who is the richest of all of the people, all of the rulers, and that's what he thinks makes him so special? Could it be that you grew up in a rich family attached to rich people? Hey, Elon Musk, you ever wondered why you think you're better than everyone because you're rich? To do with your father? To do with your upbringing? Hey, Donald Trump, ever wondered about your father and your family and how that influences what you think is good? Hey, Jeff Bezos. Hey, everyone in capitalism. So Socrates throws out maybe a little clue or puzzle for him to reflect on. By the way, ever noticed that you are family friends with the king of Persia? Funny that you think that only gold and silver is virtue. Anyway, let's keep going though. Let's get back to it. Getting this gold and silver, do you mean in a just and pious way? Or does it make no difference if you're robbing an old granny? No. Of course it makes a difference. And if you were doing it in an unjust and unholy way, it wouldn't be virtue, would it? No, it'd be vice, without a doubt. So then, whatever you're doing, so long as it's with justice and temperance and piousness and all these other parts or aspects of virtue, accompany the getting of these things. If not, it won't be virtue. Having the gold and silver won't be good unless you get it through these ways. How could it still be virtue? Robbing an old lady, exploiting the people, using capitalism, buying all the stocks, the way that people become rich today. How could it be virtue? We even knew it back then. That would mean not having gold and silver, not being able to get rich. If the system is a scam and you only get rich by being a scammer, then not being rich would actually be virtue. Being at a loss, or what's being at a loss that applies not just to physical things, but also to states of mind and insight? Aporia. What we later go on to call being stung like a stingray. Appears to be weasel word. As in like, yeah, it should be. Yeah, that's the truth. Not appears to be. That's a scapegoat word. Therefore, the way of getting is no more virtue than not having it. The way of providing no more than the being at a loss of these kinds of goods will be virtue. That which comes to be with justice will be virtue, and that which comes to be without those aspects of real being, kakai, vice, like the kakko daemon. Hang on a second, are you messing with me? So is it not the case that we said a while ago that each one of these is a part of virtue? Justice, sound-mindedness, piousness, all such as these? Yeah. Are you messing with me? You playing with me, Meno? What do you mean? I said don't break virtue up. Give it to me as a whole, using the paradigm, using the dialectic. But now you're telling me that virtue is the ability to get good things along with justice. But justice is a part of virtue. So that's why I'm asking if you're playing with me. Give me the whole of it. Don't just say getting good things with virtue, with justice is virtue. Justice is a part of it. By the way, didn't we just say that everyone seeks good? So your definition of justice is every action is virtue, so long as it's performed with a part of virtue. What kind of a crazy definition is that, Meno? This is what happens if you don't follow the dialectic paradigm we've been giving you. Where's highlight? There we go. So what? Well, what have we seen Socrates do all the time with everything he has, over and over again, with all of his qualities or aspects or parts of his being? Parts of being, just like justice and temperance and holiness, are parts of virtue. By the way, he goes on to say, they are parts of being. So parts of the being are these qualities. And what have we been doing today? We've been saying, hey, Socrates has parts of his being. He seems to be really just in how he deals with criticism. He seems to keep his cool temperance. He seems to keep encouraging people, Meno, to get back to the logos, which is what the gods desire, the eudaimonia. The gods and the good gods and spirits always follow the logos. The nature of being is ousia. So all of these things that Socrates has been doing, that he has been using for one single purpose, are the parts of his being which seem to be directly connected to the parts of the being. What does that mean about Socrates' way of being in connection with true being? By the way, the only one that we haven't seen, because being benefits through the good daemons, being follows the dialectic and the logos, being unfolds our physical world through the logos, it unfolds the communications through mind and dreams and reality through the logos. It's where the dialectic and logos exists. Being exists not from having a physical presence, but by in a constant state of self-reflection or ousia, perfect self-reflection, but also reflecting on its higher cause, the self. So its nature is ousia, its highest activity is to self-reflect on the cause of its nature, just as we are doing here, everything Socrates is doing reflects the nature of being, except for this one. The big one we're focusing right on now. The one where we're at the text is hanging on. This being at a loss is no more virtue. This aporia is self-virtue. He said, not having gold and silver is still self-virtue if you only get gold and silver by being a con artist, a scammer, unjust. But we know he didn't just say not having gold and silver. He said aporia is no less self-virtue. What does that mean? That means this aporia, this being puzzled, bewildered, stung, at a loss, is part of self-virtue. Self in the Greek means being. It's the honorific. Self-justice is the aspect of being that's just. Self-beauty is the beauty in being. What does that mean? Well, we can recognize these other things as being parts of Socrates' being. Now we've connected. We've seen a connection. We've come to an insight of a connection between. Let's find a nice color. Let's use yellow. Socrates. Let's zoom in a bit. Socrates' aspects of his being seem to have a relationship to, there's our simile or analogy or ratio, the aspects of the whole of being itself, or we could say self-being. Isn't that interesting? We wouldn't have seen that if we hadn't gone through this reflection again. Isn't that interesting? What's also interesting is we've seen a connection between these 1, 2, 3, and 4, that means 2. What the heck has aporia got to do with an aspect of self-being? So there's our question. Aporia, or being stung, is related to self-being how? And we already know that it is related to self-being, so we have a little confirmation here because he says, by the way, aporia is also self-virtue. Okay, what is self-virtue then? Don't know. But he has said that all of these things that are aspects of virtue, justice, holiness, temperance, are also the aspects of being. So virtue, self-virtue, would therefore be the whole of being? Is that why he keeps making this joke about breaking it down into parts and you need the whole? Not just jokes, but saying, hey, you're joking with me, you're giving me parts of virtue. I want the whole of virtue. So if the parts of virtue are also the aspects of being, it would follow that self-virtue must therefore be the whole of being. So I want the whole of virtue. Don't cut it up into its parts or aspects. Therefore, what does he do? Start again from the beginning. In the chat, okay, use logos to explain what makes you think that. Like, why do you think that? Now, So the thing in the chat is there must be more to virtue than the act of being. So I don't think you're following what we have been saying about being. Being is the nature of reality. It's the non-physical dimension that we've been looking at the whole way through. Being itself. So let me just do a quick review for you in the chat here. So we have the physical world of becoming. That's where most people like Meno are. So when Socrates says, what do you think is good? He just says, physical things like money and fame and having a good job. Physical world that most people are at. It's where we start. But philosophy is developing dianoia, which is an understanding of the realm of being. That's what dianoia is. That's what philosophy is. So this encouragement for self-reflection encourages us to reflect on ourselves, not our physical self, but our true self. If you're certain that there's nothing beyond the physical world, you can't do it. You are not in aporia. You're not curious and open-minded and stung. And if you're not doing the dialectic, you are not building a bridge through self-reflection and aporia from the physical world to be able to dianoia, understand the realm of being. No, it's not a part of the physical world. That's not what being is. The direct apprehension of the realm of being is called the cognitive function of nous. Now, I'm not saying knowing. In the past translations of Plato, they've used the word knowing. But that's garbage, because knowing is a word that some people talk about. I know how to fix a bike. I know how to change a tire. So we use that word to refer to the physical world sometimes. So we need a new word, which means only the direct apprehension of the realm of being. That's why we have to use the Greek word nous. That's why we need the word dianoia. It's not understanding how to fix a bike. It's specifically understanding the realm of being. That's what makes philosophy different from lovers of opinions. People who call themselves philosophers nowadays, Socrates says, they aren't philosophers. They're con artists. They're people who use words to con or heuristically, and they just want to debate people. It's garbage. It doesn't help anything. It's not philosophy. Philosophy is specifically, as we're reading from Socrates, encouraging ourselves and our friends to be engaged in self-reflection, ousia, in that puzzled, bewildered, open, curious state of mind, not certain that you have all the answers, using the dialectic pattern to organize your thinking, using the self-logos terms, so we're not focused on jelly beans, we're focused on virtue and truth and justice and reality and self, because that's what benefits us. That's what we've been seeing today. That's the realm of being. So if that's the realm of being, the physical world is called the world of becoming. Because everything in the physical world is in a state of change. It's becoming, it's growing older, or it's decaying and dying. So it's the realm of becoming. If you are focused on the world of becoming, you are a lover of opinions, of beliefs. It's not philosophy. It's not what we're here for. What do you think you're here to count the jelly beans in China? Do you think you're here to gather gold and silver? Nope. We just read that gathering gold and silver, if it's not done with the real beings, non-physical aspects of the non-physical level of reality and mind itself, then it's not virtue. In fact, not having gold and silver is still self-virtue. It has nothing to do with being able to get physical things. Virtue has nothing to do with how rich you are. But self-virtue And when the Greeks use the word self, it means the honorific. It points to that realm of being. So we have the aspects of being, that's called the eidos. But also other aspects of being would be self-beauty, self-justice, these self-goodness, the logos and dialectic. These are all aspects that we can distinguish within the realm of true being, or the oneness experience of mind minding mind, or what's that called? Ousia. So we are doing self-reflection as philosophers, reflecting on ourselves, reflecting on the realm of being, using the dialectic and logos. We are ourselves making us more like being itself. Why? Because being is self-reflection. It's ousia. Its existence isn't because it has physical shape in physical time. Its existence is because it's reflecting on itself. That's how it maintains eternal. One of its eidos is it's eternal. So you could call it God if you wanted to. I don't think it's good to use that word because it's so loaded with all of these terrible false beliefs from people's opinions about what God is. But it's eternal. It's truth. It's the cause of our physical world. It's why we focus on it, if you want to come to understanding. Otherwise, you're just debating with beliefs, and that gets you nowhere. Gets you stuck like Meno. So what does that mean? Well, if aporia is self-virtue, and the parts of self-virtue are the eidos, parts of real being, then the whole of virtue must be, well, the hypothesis that we can gain from that by playing the game, by pulling out the pieces, by organizing them together to reach a conclusion. What's the conclusion we come to? Self-virtue must be the whole of being, which leads to Socrates' final question. Hey, let's start again from the beginning, which is what he always does. Let's get back to it again. Let's go back again. Let's follow the logos again, using the dialectic as best we can. But also we've come to a new conclusion. We've got a new question. How do you think anyone can know whatever virtue is if they do not know self? How can you understand the problems caused in humanity by people's beliefs if you don't have an understanding? You can't. You can't debate beliefs. That's why debates don't work. That's why it's not philosophy. That's why we're not going anywhere. That's why we're still doing genocide and capitalism and exploitation and slavery. Because you can't solve problems of beliefs with beliefs. You need to learn dianoia. That's what Socrates is saying. In other words, how can you understand the problems of the physical world and beliefs unless you are operating at a different cognitive level and a different ontological or level of reality beyond it? Equally so, how if virtue or self-virtue is the whole of being, how can you know the whole of it unless you are on the higher metaphysical level, the self, which is beyond even being, which is the cause of being. So ousia is reflecting on yourself, but also ousia can reflect on your cause. That's what we're doing. So how do you solve problems of beliefs? You reflect on the cause of beliefs. That's philosophical midwifery. That's why we do it on the channel. How do you understand beliefs as a whole? Reflect on the cause. What's the cause of the physical world? Being. That's philosophy. But how do you have self-virtue? If self-virtue, true excellence of ourselves, our true highest functioning, is to apprehend the whole of being all at once, you can't do it unless you're doing ousia or reflecting on its cause, leading us to knowing the self, the primary axiom for the ancient Greek philosophers: know thyself. We would say know and show thyself, because Socrates is doing something. So that's something that we have gained from reading in this way, but also we have gained a new puzzle, that is, if Socrates' way of being is matching all of the things that we are seeing and learning about from the text of being, we have seen an analogy. What do we do when we see an analogy? Once we see an analogy in the text, we know there's a puzzle here to be solved, just like the video game. Right? You're walking down the mansion in the video game, and there's a green key in the green door and an orange key in the orange door, and you go to the blue door and there's no key there. You know, there's an analogy. The colored key goes in the colored door. So if I find one door without a key, or if I find a blue key without a blue door, I know what I have to do to play the game and solve the puzzle is find the missing part of that analogy. Find where that blue door is if I find a blue key, or find the blue key if I see the door and I don't have the key. That's how thinking works. That's how puzzles work. That's how video games work. That's also how analogy works and how reading works. So if we recognize that there is an analogy between, by reflecting on Socrates' way of being the way we have been doing right now, we have recognized Socrates' aspects of his way of being. What are they? We've seen. Well, we just got, they're all right above here. We've seen. Let's use this color. Let's use this color here. Being is in ousia. Socrates is, number one, engaged in ousia. Self-reflection. Self-reflection and reflection on causes. What's that called? Formally, in its highest, ousia. Neat. The blue key is in the blue door. Let's zoom in a little bit. Self-reflection and reflection on causes. Is to ousia. What else is Socrates doing? Encouraging, and so he's introducing, encouraging, and modeling the dialectic paradigm of using the logos. So that's the blue key in the blue door. Let's make it blue. Now, what do we say? You see a green key in a green door. Now we've got a let's say orange key. Dialectic paradigm of using the logos. That's what he's doing all the time, and using all of his charm and wit and humor and courage and grace and temperance and cool-headedness to encourage Meno to do, while also doing himself, using the dialectic paradigm of using the logos. That's what we have been doing all day today. Yay for us. Which is to, in self-being, well, where do you think the logos and the dialectic comes from? The self-logos is an aspect of being, and so is the self-dialectic. So in these two ways, Socrates' aspects of being is reflecting the whole of self-being. for your own sake and for my own benefit. So we've got an orange key and an orange door. Now it's got a purple key and a purple door. So for Meno's sake and for Socrates' sake is why he's doing this. What is the ideal version of that exists eternally as a fundamental aspect of being for all time and for always, even if you're black, even if you're white, even if you're a woman, even if you're a man, even if you're a Palestinian, even if you're an Israelite, even if you are a Protestant, even if you're an Anglican, even if you're an alien, even if you're a human, even if you live 100 million years in the future, even if you live in ancient Athens 2,500 years ago, even if you live here right now. What's the aspect of being that has that nature? We call goodness, or we call it self-goodness. Now let's say self-goodness because the word good can apply to physically good things like gold and silver. That's Meno's problem. Meno's problem is one of the fundamental aspects of his problem is he's stuck in the physical world. So when Socrates says, hey, when I say good things, where are you at, boy? Oh, gold and silver, really? Oh my goodness. So we're not, of course, the realm of being isn't gold and silver. That's absurd. So we want self-goodness. And as it's the cause of the physical world, and it's the thing that not only causes the physical world at each moment, between each frame that we experience in reality, we experience motion because every moment the physical world is destroyed and created, like a film strip. That's the third hypothesis of Parmenides. It's also the spiritual experience of a few different spiritual traditions. It's their highest level of vision. Thumbs up. To see the gap between each moment of the physical world. That's the way in which being relates to the physical world. To bestow its goodness and intelligibility, to allow us what we need to master our art, reach our destiny, do what we're here for, master the art of the dialectic. That's called bestowing a goodness at all times. That's how being functions in this way. Self-goodness or self-benefit. The purple key is in the purple door. Socrates' way of being is matching what we are learning about the aspects of true being. Isn't that interesting? Because the question that he just asked us is, how can you know the whole of being? If self-virtue is the whole of all of the real beings, how can you know virtue if you don't know the self? Well, Socrates' way of being seems to be reflecting being itself. But we've been playing the game, so we've got a bunch of terms that we can play with. The green key is in the green door. The orange key is in the orange door. The purple key is in the purple door. One more thing we haven't talked about yet. Let's make the yellow key aporia. Aporia. What the heck does being at a loss have to do with being? Because doesn't being know everything? Isn't that the nature of being? Self-wisdom, self-knowledge? Isn't that nous? What the heck has aporia, being stung, puzzled, or bewildered, have to do with the nature of being? Because Socrates says, I'm stung. Let's see it in the text. Socrates says, so this, both my soul and my mouth are numb. You are like a flat-headed stingray of the sea. I do not, says Socrates, It is being self-numb, self-benumbed, that makes others numbed, says Socrates. I make others puzzled not from my self-abundance, but my being all the more self-puzzled, self-aporia. So he does use the word self, so he's giving us a clue. Aporia can be the honorific. Also, he said up here that aporia is also self-virtue. So we know, well, we're working with the hypothesis we're carrying with us from our puzzle, that self-virtue is the whole of being. So aporia is also part of self-being. And Socrates says that I am in self-aporia. So there is such a thing as self-aporia, and aporia can be in self-being. How the hell does that make sense? We've got at least 3 clues. This one here, this one from this one here, where he says, so at clue 1 is aporia is also self-virtue. Clue 2 is he's saying that he has self-aporia, which means the being of aporia. And also this big question, which is that virtue is the whole of being. And the 4th part of the puzzle is what we have created ourselves by reading in this way as an active participant, playing the game, as Alan Watts says, playing the best and noblest game, as Pierre Grimes says, playing the only real game in town, says, which is this: looking for these puzzles, reflecting on the text in a curious state of mind, pulling out the self-logos, arranging it with the dialectic paradigm so we can play the game and benefit. We are doing it. So just as Socrates is like being, we are like Socrates. So we are part of an extended analogy. So Socrates' aspects of being as like the being of, as is to the aspects of the whole as being, as to us reading in this way. So we are, by reading in this way, an active participant in a great lineage, a spiritual successorship, the greatest, the lineage of our spiritual and cultural golden age from the ancient Greeks. But also it's the tradition of human destiny. So we are ourselves, by reading in this way, a part, an active participant, a member of the greatest spiritual, philosophical, human lineage and tradition. Because we are reading in the same way that Socrates, we are reflecting Socrates' aspects of being in our reading. And we have just discovered, only because we were doing that Socrates' aspects of being reflects the aspects of the whole of being, which might help us answer the question on the table: how the heck can you know the whole of self-being unless you know the self? Or unless, does that mean because Socrates' self is the whole of being? So we've got some more to work with that question, but also we've got this thing here. What happened to the... So what is the last thing we have? The last key. We need to find the door for this key. Stung, puzzled, bewildered state of mind. Stung. Whoops, too big. Stung. Still too big. Stung. Let's do that better. Stung. Puzzled, bewildered. I love it. What is that? It's a state of mind. Stung like a flat-headed stingray. Notice, didn't take the flat-headed insult personally. He ignored the ego stuff, the physical world stuff, the personal insult stuff, the physical appearance stuff. Didn't care at all about the insult to his physical appearance. Just went for the highest aspect of it and see how it reflects his true state of being and the nature of reality, and says, yep, I am stung. I am stinging you. If by that you mean I am myself in a state of self-aporia, if that's what you're using the metaphor for. So he took the best possible way you could take that metaphor, which is charming, which is the bedside manner. Meno didn't mean it, probably didn't mean it in that way. Almost certainly it was just a block to the Logos, a counterattack at following the Logos, to attack his appearance, to threaten him if he leaves Athens, to call him a sorcerer because he doesn't like being stung. He doesn't like realizing he doesn't know what he's talking about. He likes pretending to be the expert. How many people do? But Socrates took it in the best possible way. Is that part of the art? Is that part of self-virtue? To recognize that humans will always have problems? Well, unless they're doing midwifery, humans will have problems, which will manifest as a block to the Logos. They will drop into these physical world stuff, gold and silver, physical appearance, personal attacks, as a way of blocking the Logos, which will therefore block them from reaching being, because that's what it means to be human. Is part of the art to recognize that that's just the nature of being human. And therefore, when someone does do that, do your best to look for the highest aspect of that functioning and focus in on that, and invite them back into the dialectic, back into following the Logos by saying, hey, you know what? Let's look at this aspect. Maybe there is some truth in there that we can focus on and roll with. Because he said, hey, I'm not taking it personally. I'm going to make a comment about how, you know what, you're talking about my appearances. That's because you're beautiful. And beautiful people like to make comparisons or similes. Yeah, I might look like a flat-headed stingray, but you just want me to make a beautiful simile about how beautiful you look. You look like a beautiful lion or something. But I'm not going to do that. Because that's you have the advantage. So charming, humor, charm, dissolving the situation, not taking the counterattack personally. It's like spiritual Aikido. Taking this negative energy that opposes the Logos, because that's the nature of pathologos, that's the nature of blocks. It wouldn't be a block if it didn't block the Logos. But taking that, rolling with it, making a joke about it, maybe throwing out a lovely compliment to change your state of mind a little bit, and then focusing on the highest aspect of that analogy. Oh yeah, maybe I am like a stingray because I don't have self-abundance. I don't have all the answers. I'm not thinking that wisdom is being knowing, like your teacher, like 99.9% of human beings alive today. It's the opposite. I am in self-aporia. I have the highest aspect of puzzlement. Self-aporia. You just resemble one who doesn't know. I'm not really buying it. But me, I have it even by being even more self-benumbed do I make others numb. So let's focus on that aspect of it. And now that we have, and now concerning virtue, I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to consider and search along with you. Once again, he takes that, he dissolves the counterattack, he uses his charm, his humor to dissolve it and sidestep it. He looks for the highest aspect in the words, and then let's go back to the search again. Let's go back again. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's try again. Didn't you promise to use it over and over and over? He is doing the same thing. He's inviting him back once again to following the logos. Which is what we do every day on this channel. Every day on this channel, we are invited once again to follow the logos. And we always say, hey, go as far as you can. And then once you hit your block, well, I've been saying, well, you know, it's like you're running a hurdle race. It's difficult to jump the hurdles. But if you're following the logos and doing midwifery on the path logos, your second lap will be free of the hurdles. That's what it is. That's what removing your blocks means. But now we can say something different. We can say, hey, stay in the game, and once you reach the hurdles, once you reach the blocks, once you have that caca daemon telling you to stop playing, do something else, jump out of the game, I can't do it, this is not important, go get gold and silver instead. Make a joke about it. Make a joke at how beautiful you are. Don't put yourself down. He's not putting him down. Look how beautiful you are. Make a joke that builds yourself up. Take that hurdle or that inner criticism and find the highest aspect of it. Hey, you know when you said I don't know nothing and I should stop doing philosophy? Maybe I don't know, but that's more of a reason to do philosophy. So, I'm going to take that part of it. What a very clever way of saying that. Inner voice. Making a joke about it. Looking for the highest aspect of it. A joke that builds you up. Always as an invitation to get back into the game. So before we've been saying, hey, reach the hurdles, keep going. Now we reach the hurdles, do that. Which is being like Socrates. Which might therefore be like being like the whole of being. So if we do that, we are ourselves not just reading in this way, but also so not just reading or whoops, make it a bit bigger. Definition, how we pull out our definitions, but us being and treating ourselves in this way. Or demonstration. There's our walking dialectic. Us reading in this way or definition, and us being in this way and treating ourselves in this way, especially once we hit our blocks or hurdles, like every time Meno does in the text, then we are being like Socrates and his way of being, and what we are seeing is that's also like being like the whole of self-being, which is also whole of self-being and the whole of self-being we are discovering is also self-virtue. Isn't that neat? So all the more reason to treat yourself in that way. Have fun with it. So we're saying, hey, it's play. But it's at every time. You're either going to play with that inner voice that tells you, hey, block the logos, do something else, or you're not good enough. Or you're going to be a slave to it, go, I guess you're right. I'm just a dumb slave and I'm going to do what I'm told. Don't be like that. That's stupid. Don't be a slave to ignorance, like Meno. Treat that inner voice like Socrates. Be a master. I'm leading the conversation. I'm going to dissolve you. I'm going to make a joke that builds me up. And I'm going to look for the highest aspect as a way of inviting myself back into being a master of the dialectic, not a slave to you. You shouldn't be in charge, Meno. You say that to your inner voice. Of course. Notice, it's like Alan Watts, life is play. That's the game. And as Pierre says, that's the noblest game. And what we are saying, it's the only game. It's all we can do at all times, which will make it our way of being. Just like Socrates is doing it at all times, just like self-virtue and self-being are doing it at all times. Isn't that neat? I think that's neat.
What?
Wow. Wow.
So I got a bunch of sound drops because I think it's neat. Now, we also have, because we're doing it in this way, we've discovered a question. Hey, if self-reflection, reflection on causes is what Socrates and we are doing, that's the nature of ousia, which is an aspect of being. Hey, using the dialectic paradigm of using the logos, which Socrates is always doing and encouraging Meno to do, encouraging us to do, that's the self-logos and self-dialectic is aspects of being. Again, aspects of his being, aspects of the being. For Meno's sake and for Socrates' sake, hey, that's benefit. Self-goodness and self-benefit are aspects of being. And he is always stung or puzzled or bewildered. That's the key. What's the door? That's our question. What the heck does that mean? How in the heck can being itself be not abundant but completely at a loss? And he even gives us some clues. He says, by the way. So there's our question that we are having. He says, aporia is self-virtue. There's a clue that will help us with our question. That is line 78E right here. This aporia is also self-virtue. 78E. Sometimes it's good to have the quotes just to remind us and to go back to later as we reflect self-ousia on it again later. So we're pulling it out from the text. Part of reading. And also he said, I am self-benumbed. That's how I make others numb. So we have a question. How is he able to be so charming? That's one of the questions we have. Well, part of it is being self-benumbed by my being in self-aporia. So part of his, like we talked about, one of the things we gain today is a way of treating ourselves and others in this Socratic way. Recognize the counterattack, understand the counterattack, dissolve the counterattack with humor and fun, and also pull out the highest aspect of it and make the jokes in a way that builds yourself up. Find the highest possible aspect of it and use that as a way of inviting you back into the logos and dialectic. That's now we have a way of treating ourselves that way from the text, which is a practice, which is the demonstration, which is what he's encouraging us to do. But how do you do that? Well, it takes practice, it takes understanding, but also we talked about a charmingness. He said, how do I do that? By being, how do I help others be numb, which is needed for the self-reflection? By being all the more self-puzzled, self-aporia. That's 80D. So, how can being be aporia? Aporia is self-virtue, 78E, and also, he says, I am being even more self-aporia, which means aporia can be, if this is a clue, aporia can be a self-term or an aspect of being. So these are two clues that will just reminding us that our question is legit, which often happens. But often what happens in this game, when you discover a question or even an insight or an answer, often you'll just read a few paragraphs forward, and we've seen this many times. You'll read a few paragraphs forward and you'll find a kind of confirmation of your insight, or in this case, a confirmation of our puzzle or question. What's our question? How on earth can being be stung, puzzled, or bewildered? Is that a legit question? Well, we read a little bit further and he said, yeah, self-aporia. Yeah, aporia is self-virtue, which means it's to do with the whole of being. So today we've gained a new way of relating to ourselves. We've gained more insight on how we read. We gained a new insight on how we look for questions and solve questions. I really like that new way of treating ourselves, especially when we find ourselves playing the other game. You're either playing that game or this game. That game is being a slave to the false, the kakadaemon, vice, as he says in the text, vice. Being a slave to the kakadaemon is vice, or you're developing mastery as the master of the dialectic, one who guides and follows the logos artfully. That's the real game in town. That's the noblest game. That's our destiny, the art of the dialectician. You're in one or the other. Whenever you find yourself falling into the slave game, because you're only in one of two, we have learned a new way of pulling ourselves out. And by the way, whenever you're in that, either you have been following the logos and doing the dialectic, and you notice a counterattack, you start criticizing yourself, you start looking at appearances, you start attacking people or whatever to block the logos. Or you just catch yourself not doing this and, oh, what was I doing with my time? I was seeking gold and silver like Meno. You can say, oh, I was having a Meno moment. What should I do? Insult myself like Meno? Nope. You have a Meno moment, you then have I think we wrote this down somewhere. Meno moment and a Socrates something. Got so many notes on the board, it's hard to find sometimes. Okay, I can't seem to see it. And I can't do a search function because it's all just my own writing. A Meno moment and a Socrates save. I don't know if that's a... I'll find it later, I guess. I remember Meno moment. Oh, maybe it's on the other blackboard. Sometimes when my blackboard have a lot of notes, it takes a while to load. Here we go. A Meno moment and a Socrates switch. That's what we said last time. So when you catch yourself playing the other game you can be playing, being a slave to the pathologos, the ignorance, you say, oh, I'm in a Meno moment. What do? Make a Socrates switch, which again is an opportunity, an invitation to practice the dialectic. Because the dialectic also involves this art of correcting. Socrates is always correcting, practicing the art of the dialectic to dissolve, make a joke, a building up joke, look for the highest aspect of the metaphor as a way of inviting yourself back into the logos, creating the conditions, the gentle and friendly way of the art of the dialectician. So when you catch yourself in a Meno moment, you can say, oh, actually, that was a great thing. It's an opportunity to practice that aspect of the true game, the art of the dialectic. The noblest game, the only game in town. So we've gained that, and we've gained a question, which is how in the world can true being be in aporia? And also we can add that to our question, which is how in the heck can we know the whole of being? Because that's knowing what virtue is. So how does aporia or self-aporia relate to knowing the whole of virtue? Because how the hell can you know the whole of being? And how does it relate to knowing the self? So there's a question. What has aporia got to do with the whole of being, got to do with virtue, got to do with the self? That's the big question. It's an epic question we've got. We're only 15 pages in. That's an epic one. Let's put it on the board. Epic question. Which is, what does aporia, self-aporia, what's that got to do with the whole of virtue, whole of being? Yep. Or knowing the whole of being. And what's that got to let's make that a different color for fun. Whoops. So what does this self-aporia that we have recognized in our analogy got to do with knowing the whole of being? And which has also got to do with knowing virtue. What? Which is where we're reading here. How does anyone know whatever virtue is if you do not know the self? Which means this whole of being, knowing the whole of being, which is knowing virtue, knowing what, knowing virtue. And what's that got to do with how can you know whatever virtue is if you do not know self? So there's the epic question. What self-aporia that Socrates is focusing in on here? What's that got to do with knowing the whole of being? And what are those two things got to do with knowing virtue, which is the question that we're on formally in the text? And how can you know whatever virtue is without knowing self? Says Socrates, so he's giving us a clue there. He doesn't say the connection between self and being. We've been wondering about it and reflecting on it a lot, but he's giving us another part to the question. He's helping us out here. He's giving us, hey, you've got this part of the key, this part of the key, I'm giving you this part of the key. We've got this huge key now, this huge key that has this part, and this part, and this part, and this part, and a little crest on it. picture there. So we're looking for the door. Where's the door? What's the key? What's the question? What's self-aporia got to do with knowing the whole of being? Which has got to do with knowing virtue? And how does all that relate to knowing the self? And why is that necessary for those? And is it? Whoa, big question. So we've got more on the significance today of how to read, the significance of reading in this way, making us like Socrates, which is making us like being. And by the way, being like being might help us with this question, because how do you know the whole of being unless you know the self? So maybe yourself has to be being to know virtue, to answer these questions. What's all that got to do with self-aporia? Nevertheless, we also recognizing that if we read in this way, we are being like Socrates' being, which is like the whole of being. That's how we read, and that's how we treat ourselves. Catch yourself whenever you're in a Meno moment, use it to make a Socrates switch. Always. When? Always. Always, 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 always. That's the game. That's life is a game, says Alan. This is the noblest game, says Pierre, and we say it's to be played all the time because it's the only game in town. You're always playing it anyway. So we make that Socrates switch. We're practicing all those aspects of the art, all those aspects of being, for the goal of inviting ourselves back into the way of the dialectician again and again and again and again, following the logos through the dialectic. That's the invitation Socrates is making again and again. That's what we have to make to ourselves again and again, and that's what I'm making to you again today. Join me next time to follow the logos with the dialectic paradigm again next time. And thank you for playing, and hope you had fun playing the game today with me. So, on that, I hope you take the invitation, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me. And now I have to play the outro music. Oh, and a reminder, subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell if you want notifications, and follow on Twitch if you like. Join the Discord, link below if you want to. And yeah, I hope I see you next time. Bye.